Hello everyone. Lukas will be presenting the session Past, Present, and Future of Networking in Debian. Your active participation is highly encouraged. Thank you for joining this session. Thank you, Lukas.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm glad we have so many people in the room today. My name is Lukas. I'm a software engineer in the Ubuntu Foundations team at Canonical. And yeah, I want to have a discussion today about Debian's networking stack, or stacks in plural, I guess. Yeah, this is the description of above. I'm not going to read it out. I think you might have read it before. It's what we have listed on the DebConf schedule. But you can find a link to the slides and also the Etherpad. I like to encourage you to take notes, add suggestions to the Etherpad. I also have it open here on my second screen. The link to the slides is also referenced in the Etherpad, so you can click through and you can click along on the slides, follow the references and everything. Maybe a brief introduction about myself. I've been actively involved in Debian since a few years. I'm a DD. I'm also a core dev on the Ubuntu side, and I'm the upstream maintainer for Netplan. So maybe can you raise your hands who has heard of Netplan before and knows what it roughly does? Many. That's good. Maybe for the others, a very brief summary of what it is. I mean, I did a lengthy talk about Netplan at DebConf India last year. So if you want to learn more, I'd recommend watching that other talk. There's also a link in the slides. But in a nutshell, Netplan is a networking tool that reads declarative network configuration and then controls underlying backends, networking daemons such as systemd-networkd or NetworkManager. So it allows to enable multiple stacks, kind of. Like you can choose the best stack for your scenario or your workload. But still, the benefit of having this slim layer on top of the daemons is having a common way to describe the network configuration, because right now it's very confusing, and I will get to that in a bit because we have so many ways to do networking on Debian. Right, so this is above, but I prepared some 15 minutes of summary of like history, where we come from, where we stand today, and I also drafted from the previous discussions that happened over the last couple of years. I drafted some like 3 potential scenarios that could lead, that we could go to in the future, that I will present, and then we can have the discussion afterwards. So yeah, where do we come from? In the past, there was NetBase. Essentially, when Debian was started, the internet was still a new and fancy concept. It wasn't very widely adopted at the time. So Debian developers started creating some static scripts for network configuration. Configurations weren't that complex back then because there weren't just that many technologies in the space yet. So yeah, that worked pretty nicely. Then in the year 2000, some of those network scripts got split out into a package called ifupdown as we know it today. And ifupdown is configured through the /etc network interfaces file. Some also call it ENI for that reason, as well as the /etc network ifup.d or ifdown.d hooks, like those are shell scripts that can be called whenever an interface comes up or it is brought down. Then basically arbitrary shell script can be executed to do more things. And yeah, it's been the tried and trusted way to do networking on Debian since then. Year 2000 it was split out. It was around the Debian Potato release, so that's quite a while ago. So let's fast forward almost 25 years and see where we stand today. This slide is a bit confusing, but so is the current networking landscape in Debian. These days we have 4 different implementations of ifupdown. We have classic ifupdown, we have ifupdown 2, which is a new implementation written in Python that uses a bit of a different architecture. We have ifupdown NG, that's also a new implementation, but it tries to be mostly drop-in compatible with classic ifupdown, but it uses like more modern technologies, modern code base, and so on. And we have busybox ifupdown, which is kind of a fork of classic ifupdown from some time in the past that got integrated, like trimmed down a little bit and integrated into busybox so that it can be used in like more constrained environments. At the same time, the world around Debian moved on and new networking tools were created, such as NetworkManager, systemd-networkd, and Netplan. And so yesterday I was looking at our wiki, the network configuration page, and the first section that it shows is the 4 ways to configure the network. So yeah, you can do it through ifupdown, and as we learned, there are 4 different variants of ifupdown. You can do it through NetworkManager on, like, it's the default for laptop configurations. When you use the I to install like GNOME desktop, it will automatically set up NetworkManager for you. And then we have systemd-networkd, which is not used or configured natively by default in any of the spins, but it's being installed by default as it's part of the systemd package, so it's available on most Debian installations, and many sysadmins opt to use it on their local machines. And then we have Netplan, which is being used on the Debian cloud images as of Bookworm, and it also activates systemd-networkd beneath it. So yeah, this is all very confusing, and that's why we had plenty of discussions in the past couple of years. There was a talk by Mark Haber at the, I think it was Debian reunion in Hamburg last year. We have, well, the still ongoing discussion about the DHCP client. After ISC deprecated the DH client that has been in use by ifupdown, we kind of struggled to make a new choice, which I guess would be DHCP-CD base to introduce a new DHCP client. And that, yeah, I really think we need to move that forward. It has been pending for over a year now, and we need to do something about it. As I mentioned, I gave a talk last year at DebConf with some discussions afterwards. So if you're interested in more details about Netplan, you can click that 3rd link. And then just recently we had some new discussions happening, as we do almost every year, on Debian Devel about ifupdown maintenance and Netplan. So yeah, how did we end up in this confusing and situation? I tried to kind of extract some of the technical difficulties that people have with classic ifupdown and why they opt to use other tools. So yeah, I'd like to present some of them. I think one of them is dependencies between interfaces need to be considered and crafted carefully, because ifupdown is kind of linear in its approach to bring up the interfaces, and if you have composite interfaces like bridges, bonds, VLANs, VXLANs, whatever, where you have a parent-child relationship, for example, you need to make sure that the parent is defined first and the child afterwards, so that you don't run into like race conditions and don't confuse the tool. The other thing is its imperative nature, especially with the hooks. Like you have hooks that can do whatever. Those are just shell scripts. They run when the interface comes up or down. So you don't really have a unique view on the actual network configuration. You don't know the state that the system is supposed to be in, because you don't know which scripts have been executed or not executed, and it's kind of hard to compare to debug your network situation. Another point is portability. Like if you deploy a system, an image to multiple machines, multiple VMs, whatever, you cannot really say I want DHCP on any event interface that is available on that machine, because you kind of need to hard code the interface name that you want to configure. And the interface name might change depending on what the underlying system is. Then we have the reloading at runtime. There are some improvements, I think, from ifupdown too, like if reload, where you have the if up and if down script, so you can still do some things at runtime with ifupdown, but you don't have the full set of just reapply my network configuration and bring it to that state thing. Another point is test coverage. We have some auto-package tests for ifupdown, but due to its old code base, I think, well, it was never really, it was an afterthought, I guess, adding tests to it. So we have some tests, but I think most of them actually skipped in debCI because they need, I think, a VM to execute. So we can do it locally, we can run it on our machines, but it's not tested automatically in debCI, in the containers of debCI. And then finally, we have the maintenance burden of it being a native package, as is basically Debian only, in addition to being a legacy code base, which is harder to maintain by nature. I think from the recent discussions that happened a few weeks ago, we have some ideas, efforts of combining like the ifupdown development and driving it in one direction. I actually have a quotation from Santiago here. I don't know if you want to add something to that yourself. Is there any plans between the ifupdown maintainers to drive into a specific direction, or?
Actually, I would prefer if you continue.
Yeah, okay, I can continue.
Yeah, just to say that I would prefer if you continue and we can.
Yeah, we can have the discussion later. Yeah. So yeah, I think, like, from my understanding from the discussions, there is some benefit in like combining the efforts, like ifupdown maintainers getting together and focusing on their energy on one project. Ifupdown sounds like it would be maybe off the table because it uses a bit of a different architecture. It is implemented in Python. But yeah, quoting Santiago here, we're hitting some design issues and we should focus all the efforts in just one of the implementations. And I think that's good. My personal idea is that might go towards ifupdown and NG because I think it has a better testing story. It has a more modern code base. And I think that would be a good thing to do, to like combine the efforts on the thing that is, and trying to get it as compatible to classic ifupdown as possible. So, yeah, that's where we stand today. Now, I like to present some scenarios, or talk about the future a little bit. I actually sent one email a few weeks ago to Debian Devel that got quoted by LWN, which is kind of a problem statement, which at least part of it, I like to read out. If we have to tell our users and sysadmins to do X on Debian server systems using ifupdown, while doing Y on Debian desktop systems using NetworkManager, while doing C on Debian cloud systems using Netplan, while doing something totally different on Raspberry Pi boards that run Debian server setup, but using Wi-Fi as a primary interface, that's just a really bad user experience, and I think it confuses many people. So I think that is the problem statement that I'm trying to solve. And the question should be, how do we do networking on Debian? There should be a common way to describe the network configuration on a Debian system, and it shouldn't be, if you're on a laptop Debian, you do that. If you're on a container Debian, you do that. If you're on a cloud Debian, you do that. It's very confusing when people maybe do not really understand what kind of variant they use, or maybe they have a combination like a server system with a UI installed on top of it. What do they then do in such cases? So what should we do? We should look probably outside the Debian bubble, find tools that are supported by companies and adopted outside of Debian, so that are under active development and are open to community contributions as well, and also provide good test coverage so we don't break the stuff. Some of those tools got mentioned earlier that are already packaged in Debian and used to some degree, like Netplan, NetworkManager, networkd, systemd. And I mean, yeah, as I said, we essentially have this discussion every year. It comes up over and over, but we weren't really able to find a consensus. Some of the common issues that are always brought up is dependency on Python. We do not want to pull in Python into our base installation, as that would bloat it all up. We have the compatibility issue with ifupdown, especially with the hook scripts, which many people still rely on. And also all the tools don't cover all the use cases, because those are very distinct use cases. For example, on a desktop or laptop system, you want unprivileged users to be able to hop in between Wi-Fi networks, using the user interface and doing very dynamic stuff. Whereas in a container or on a server system, you have a very specific static configuration, and you want to use as little resources as possible to just make it work. Right. So. I think it makes sense. We have this split network stacks right now. We use NetworkManager on desktop. We use ifupdown on servers right now, but many opt to use networkd. We use Netplan and networkd on cloud. And I think the teams for those specific variants, they choose their network stack with the best intentions and what fits their needs best. And I think that makes sense. But we should avoid driving it differently. So yeah, a few scenarios. I came up with 3 scenarios that I see as possible way forward. The first one I call status quo ++. So we would still keep using ENI, maybe transitioning to ifupdown and G if we can agree that this is the way forward. And yeah, what's the status in that? As it's pretty much, well, it's not fully compatible, but it's pretty the basic stuff is compatible with the classic ifupdown. So we have support for it in the Debian installer by default. We have support in auto package tests. We have support in third-party installers like Phi. We still have the issue of the DH client, which is deprecated, and that needs to be resolved, but it's going on, and I think, yeah, we need to push that a little bit, but the bug has been there for a while. So that's ongoing. Then if we would transition to ifupdown and G, upstream does track some of the incompatibilities. And it's a matter of getting this work resolved to make it really a drop-in replacement for classic ifupdown. And then finally, we need to ask the FTP masters to switch the priority overrides from one package to the other, which isn't a big deal, but yeah, it also takes some time to get FTP masters moving. Scenario B, which I call the minimized scenario, that would be enablement of systemd-networkd in base and server installations. It comes already pre-installed, as I mentioned, as part of the systemd package, so it wouldn't add any storage penalty, it wouldn't blow the image as it's already pre-installed. We would keep on using NetworkManager in desktop and laptop images as we do today, and we could drop ifupdown altogether from the base installation, which would save about 200K. That's not a lot, but it's some minimization effort. The status on that is there is a pending merge request for Debian installer to do this enablement. But it still lacks support in auto package tests, and I'm not sure about third-party installers. I think it's not really covered there. I mean, Calamaris isn't really necessary because we would still be using NetworkManager on desktop, so the live images only do NetworkManager, so we don't need any support there. For Phi, I'm not sure. If we really want to drop ifupdown, we would think about how do we transition people that are currently using ifupdown to the new system. We don't want to leave them stranded, so that's an open question, I guess. The other thing is compatibility with the ifupdown hooks. There is networkd dispatcher and nm dispatcher, and there has been some analysis of packages that are affected, that are shipping some hooks, and well, this has been going on for a few years, so the analysis has been done, patches has been sent, and I think many of them have been applied, so many of the hook scripts actually work with networkd dispatcher and nm dispatcher. So I think it's not a 100% solution, but it's kind of a stopgap solution to make it work. The systemd networkd itself upstream, they don't want to support any hooks. So networkd dispatcher, because they don't want random scripts blocking their efficient networking, right? So yeah, that's their choice. NetworkD Dispatcher is kind of a third-party project that fills that gap in an okay-ish way, I guess. And again, we would need to ask FTP masters to drop ifupdown from the overrides in this case. And then finally, scenario C, which I call the universal scenario, and as the maintainer for Netplan, that would be my personal favorite. I would suggest keeping ifupdown or maybe ifupdown NG if that's the way that we want to go, at least for Trixie, so that people that upgrade or that want to migrate their systems from older Debian to newer Debian can kind of use the tooling that they know, and we can give them a really long transitioning period to learn about the new tools and get comfortable using them. And we would keep using NetworkManager on desktop installations as we do right now, because I think that makes most sense. It has all the UI integration, all the unprivileged enablement for like unprivileged users to choose their networks, and so on. And we would enable systemd-networkd on server installations, cloud containers, like the more static setups. Then we would add this small layer of Netplan on top of it, so that we have a common way to drive all of those different stacks. Netplan being a well-known declarative configuration format. I say well-known. I think it's not that well-known in Debian. I mean, in this room it seemed pretty okay, but I think overall, reading the mailing list, it's not that well-known in Debian yet. But I still think it's well-known from like public clouds, when somebody drives their public cloud instances through the cloud config network section that goes into cloud init. It's kind of a derivative of the Netplan configuration. So many people might have seen that before, and also it's well known from the Ubuntu side, where it's being in use for more than 7 years and deployed widely. So we have lots of Stack Exchange, blog posts, tutorials around it. So the knowledge is there. If people search for something, they will already find solutions. It brings pretty comprehensive test coverage in auto package tests for all kinds of networking setup, bridges, VXLANs, VLANs, whatever. And we tend to have the same test in Netplan and running it for both backends, for systemd-networkd and for NetworkManager. So all the different configurations that we have defined will be tested on all the backends. It runs really long, like almost an hour, but it really checks in detail the networking state. And also, Netplan doesn't force anybody to use it, because in this suggested scenario, existing systems would just upgrade to keep ifupdown, but new installations that were created through DI will be set up using the new tooling. Still, using the new tooling doesn't mean you're locked into Netplan, but you could actually, if you know what you're doing, you can easily use ifupdown, which would be pre-installed. You can easily use or configure systemd-networkd natively if you want to, or you can configure NetworkManager natively if you want to. Like, you don't need to use Netplan. You can use it. Like, if there's a documentation page in our wiki, we can just say, this is the way you do set up connection to Wi-Fi network, how you set up a VLAN or whatever, and it would work on all those different variants. But if somebody knows what they are doing, that they can easily drive the layer beneath it natively. What needs to be done, we have support for Netplan in the Calamares, the live installer. We have support for it in 5 for many years. I put myself some effort into Debian installer in the past couple of months, getting it landed there, so it's now in Trixie DI as well. We have supported it in auto package tests, and the same story as with systemd-networkd applies for the ifupdown hooks, where we can use NetworkD Dispatcher as kind of a stopgap solution. So the kind of only thing left to do would be asking FTP masters to make it part of the default installation, raising the priority field, and that would gain about 5 megs in size for the Netplan generator binary and its dependencies. And that would allow at boot time to translate the declarative Netplan config to whatever backend has been chosen to be used. And that's about it for the talk. Now I'd like to pick your brains to see What are the opinions? How shall we move forward? I think we really need to unlock, like we're stuck, and we need to move somewhere.
It's very nice you did this discussion, though we only have 15 minutes now remaining. So I'd like to make the case for the cloud images. I'm not 100% sure, but I think the reason why Waldy decided to use Netplan is because in the typical VM, you can hot plug a network interface, and there is no way with ifupdown that you can have it configured correctly unless you do a udev hook. Mm-hmm. So like whenever you get a udev hook, you can execute a script. And then this becomes very hackish, and we didn't want that. At least Waldy decided not to do that.
That's what we had. We had that hackish udev hook for everything before Bookworm. So, it wasn't specifically that. I think it was really more that it was the ISC DHCP being dead is part of it, and then the integration between Cloud Init and Netplan made Netplan desirable, and it did let us get rid of that hackish UDEV stuff. So that's all good. I don't think it was obviously the cloud stuff is a little bit of an outlier. Like in the rest of Debian, like we have introduced yet another way and yet another set of defaults for configuring a Debian system. So it's not great, but I do think that it does show that it's possible to do by default, and it does work, and I think that's reasonable. I think it's a good path forward.
So there's that, and there's another thing that I wanted to add is that before Bullseye, it was possible to rename interfaces the way you want using a udev rule. That is not possible anymore with Bookworm. You must do it in etc systemd-networkd. So let's say you have an interface that is 14 character long, and then you need to add a VLAN to it. So it becomes 14 character long plus dot plus, let's say, 10. That's 17 character. That's too long. The kernel doesn't accept that. Yeah. So you must rename these cards in order to have a VLAN. And currently, that's already the case with ifupdown, that you must do it with systemd-networkd. So we are already half a foot inside systemd-networkd.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I have.
Yeah, I mean, with Netplan, you don't necessarily need the name for the VLAN, I guess. It's just a convention. But yeah, Netplan has a way to rename interface as well, going through networkd, and then linking it to the parent interface if you want to create a VLAN.
And I also want to extend this topic to other resources that the kernel provides. For example, IP rules, routing tables, and IP tables, ARP tables, IP6 tables, NF tables, and the traffic control, and all other tables I can imagine. We link such a manager or a tool to form a single source of configuration, and every application want to make some modification to these shared resources. For example, the Docker daemon, it's sometimes to try to modify the default policy of the forward table to job, and suddenly you will find your network middle box failed to forwarding packets, and it's really annoying. And I want to ask that is there any plan to develop such a unified tool to manage all the resources in the kernel?
Yeah, for IP tables, NF tables, firewall-like stuff, I think it's out of scope for most of those networking daemons as far as I am aware. But routing tables, routing policy, or static routing, it's pretty much covered by systemd-networkd, by NetworkManager, and you can also define it in Netplan. I mean, that's still different ways to do it, but they all access the same kind of resources, and you can control them from the outside.
I've been using FRR routing in my environment, and it covers some of the routing problem, but sometimes there's also some scope it didn't cover, such as IP role, the firewall, and the VRF, and something like that. But in my observation, the Netplan or NetworkD, they are likely to be used in some laptop environment, which you may need to connect some Wi-Fi. But in server use, we may need to configure some route, some complex routing in different VRF and using different routing table and IP role and something like NF tables, something like that, and just using something like ifupdown or maybe Netplan is not suitable in this situation. And we have been using ifupdown for a long time, and it works most of the time. Mm-hmm. And other tools can easily be integrated into it, as we can just add some pre-up, pre-down, something like that, and it works well. Mm-hmm. But in Netplan, it just not seems right to modify some rules to add some route to some VRF. It's kind of hard.
Yeah, I mean, Netplan has native support for VRFs, and it will add the most basic rules to it automatically. But yeah, I mean, the good thing about Netplan or NetworkD, I think the same applies to ifupdown, is that if you don't configure an interface, it will not touch it. It's different with NetworkManager that tries to kind of take control of all the interfaces and manage it for you automatically, which I guess is fine for a desktop use case, but on the server you want to, like if you have a specific use case for FRR and you want to configure that manually because you're exporting that domain, then that's totally fine. You just don't put a configuration for that interface and you do it with another tool, and usually they don't get in conflict with each other.
So regarding your questions of ifupdown or your comments, I completely agree. Let's say it's a burden of development. The problem is that we lack human power to maintain it. Currently, it's just a Debian thing. So I agree, and there are two things to do about ifupdown. The first one is to decide if it will continue to be the default network managing tool, and the second is we want its status quo and so on, or we want to replace it. And I think it makes sense to replace it with something with probably the best solution is ifupdown in G, as you mentioned. And yeah. So I agree in all this. I don't know between the options what I will choose. For me personally, the disadvantage of Netplan is the dependency of Python. For the base installations, that I won't like it in my servers.
Yeah. Yeah, we had that discussion last year, and actually what we did.
I didn't remember the.
Yeah, what we did on the Netplan side is splitting the package. Like it was all one. Like the Python bits are needed for some CLI runtime configuration, but not necessarily for the static configuration. Okay. So we can just use Netplan generator, which is a pure C binary and library, and there's no Python dependency on it. And then if people want to do like runtime configuration, they can install the CLI if they want to. So there's no hard dependency on Python anymore.
Okay, cool.
In a couple of the proposals, you've suggested using NetworkD dispatcher to implement hook support. If I remember right, unless maybe things have changed, but systemd-networkd doesn't expose as fine-grained detail about the like the configuration state and the changes between state as an interface is brought up. And there's not a lot that networkd dispatcher can really do to work around that. And so I wonder if that's actually a viable option as a replacement for hooks.
Yeah, that's true. It isn't as fine-grained. It can only trigger asynchronous events, whereas ifupdown hooks can actually block the configuration,
can
do
like,
its thing, and then continue.
Yeah,
on.
or they can totally like override and take over configuration. They have, because all of the activity that DH client performs is just done in a shell script, and the hooks can redefine parts of that shell script, so they can totally rework how things are configured. And I don't think you could do that with networkd dispatcher.
Yeah, that's right.
So even I don't know if we have anything like, maybe we'd have compatibility within packaged components, but for existing systems that are being upgraded and things like that, people may have elaborate configurations that that do all sorts of strange things to their interfaces, and preserving compatibility there might not be possible.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with the hooks, like the synchronous hooks, is it's not desired by design from upstream systemd-networkd, so there's not a lot that we can do about it. As I mentioned, networkd dispatcher is more like a stopgap solution to kind of make it work kind of for most of the cases, but we can't cover all of them.
Yeah. So in that case, I feel like we would need to continue supporting like the existing like ISC style hooks for at least another Debian release while we deprecate that interface.
That was my suggestion here with the third scenario, that we keep ifupdown installed, at least for Trixie, maybe longer. That would also mean we would need to keep it maintained. But that way, people that have like this specific setup where they rely on this type of hooks, they can continue using that.
The hooks are the thing that are worrying me the most about switching to that kind of new system. I don't think even people realize that even SSHD has a hook to restart whenever an interface is brought up.
I think the SSHD hook actually got dropped. If you click through on that link, we worked on that a few years ago because we did the same thing in Ubuntu, right? And
I wanted to have something universal, but okay, there must be some other things, and I'm sure there's so many packages that have hooks that needs to be fixed, and it's probably too late right now in the development cycle of Debian for Trixie. What is your opinion?
Yeah, I think many of we did the same transition kind of 7 years ago in Ubuntu, and we kind of ran into the same issues because people were using hooks there as well. We used ifupdown before.
So you have them all listed somewhere?
Yeah, on this LP 17 something bug.
Okay.
And we sent patches, and many of them got integrated in Debian, so I think many cases are covered. Some are still open, but yeah, it's a long tail that needs to be addressed step by step.
Anyone have any question?
Over here.
What do you propose to do to reach consensus?
I hope to have
the hardest question.
Yeah. I think we should set a deadline onto ourselves. I propose like a few weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. Like after this BOF, I will take all the things that we discussed, and I intend to write another email to Debian Devel to include all the other people that are not at DebConf today. Like hopefully coming with one single proposal out of the 3, and then trying to include other people and maybe finding a compromise. I think there's still the networkd proposal from the systemd maintainers. We're not here today, but I hope that we can find a compromise with them. Like I was thinking about the priorities. I had the impression that for systemd, the most important bit is the minimal setup. So maybe we can keep networkd as it is in the default installation, and we can add Netplan only as priority standard. So it gets installed by DI in like most common scenarios, but it wouldn't be pulled in by their bootstrap. So if you like set up a very minimalistic container, you would use maybe native networkd for this specific environment, while on most common servers and other scenarios, you would install the standard utils from DI and you would pull in Netplan on top of it. So I need to reach out to them to see if that is something they can live with. But
have any question? Okay.
So I don't know if this is in scope for main goal of the decision, but I like to be familiar with the tools that I use, and don't tell my boss, but I use a lot of distros outside of Ubuntu, and systemd, like it or not, made my life easier because I don't care if I'm using SUSE, Red Hat, whatever. I know how to handle that, and what I like of Netplan, it brings me the ability of not having to instantly memorize all the different ways, but I can have one file that maybe I have my templates, which I do, and I can copy-paste one tiny file across distros, and it just works, and I get familiar with the commands and the syntax, and I don't need to think too much about what is this particular VM or container. The question is, how broad are you aiming to do this? Is there any plans or any discussion on other distributions to also use it? I'm not saying that it should be the main purpose of decision for Debian, but I would like it very much from my personal point of view.
yeah. I mean, I guess the scope for this BOF is to talk about the Debian situation, which is very specific, but there's also some adoption outside of that, like we have packages in Fedora, we have packages in Arch Linux, we have packages in Yocto. So there is some coverage. It's not a default in those distros, but it can be installed by people and can be used.
I think we have absolutely no choice but to get rid of ifupdown because of the way it's maintained. I mean, it's not well enough maintained in Debian, so we must get out of it. We must get out of ASCII, no questions asked. And then there is only systemd-networkd that will do the job. And then I agree with this gentleman that Netplan is just a shiny thing that makes life easier and that can be easily removed if you don't like it.
Yeah.
That's not entirely true, though. I mean, the earlier proposal, I think it was the status quo plus you had it. That uses ifupdown-ng, which is better maintained, and uses a different DHCP client that's still maintained. So there are alternatives. Whether they're we should consider them.
So ifupdown-ng, it's true, it's very well maintained upstream, though the package in Debian would need some more work. And I haven't seen, so I was the one, I believe, that uploaded the first package of ifupdown-ng. Someone took over. I didn't work on it, but at least someone would need to step up.
Yeah, I guess time is up. We have to stop at this point. And we can continue the discussion outside, the specific one. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the great discussion, and thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lukas. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.